Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you to Ms. Patchett and all the staff at Parnassus and the library. It's just, I'm so thrilled to be here with Louise Erdich, who, and there's my Chicago friends. Oh, hello. But I'm so thrilled to also be here with my Chicago friends and Louise Erdich, who, from whom I've learned so much through her work. One of the things that I so love about her work is how her humor is so deeply embedded in her sentences, and the sentences are often concerning such dark matters, and yet the humor shines through. And I love her work so very much. So it's a thrill to be here with you. I want to do two things. I want to read briefly, and I want to start with a story that concerns the matter of using one's material. And the story starts like this. When I was 19, I lived in Edinburgh, Scotland, and one weekend I traveled to the Isle of Rosse, which is on the western coast of Scotland before you get to Skye, and it's about 14 miles long, and there are mountains and moors, and it's a dramatic landscape. And the minute I stepped off the ferry, the heavens, they did open, the rains fell, the winds raged, and I had only been planning to stay on the island overnight, but I ended up being stranded for 5 days at the International Youth Hostel of Rosse, International. The hostel was a room much smaller than this room, and I think there was indoor plumbing, and the place was heated by a wood stove. And there we were. There were 6 of us. There were the 2 girls from Aberdeen who made it clear immediately that they loathed Americans. There was a handsome, noble, beautiful, tall, dignified, and yet cheerful Australian named Peter. He was made, as George Eliot might say, of excellent human dough. There was a German young woman named Gisela who was short, stout. She had a very strong glasses prescription. Her hair was wispy and so blonde it was white, and it looked possibly as if she hadn't washed it in many months. She was wearing an oversized fisherman's sweater that was greasy with wear. There was me, and there was the hostel warden, which is a job description and also a description of her character. She was probably in her 40s. She had brown braids, and she wore a kerchief, and she had very, very weathered skin, no doubt from the weather itself, and also from the cigarettes that she chain smoked in that small space where we were kind of stranded. Anyway, Peter made it clear that he wished to practice his German with Gisela. She spoke very little English, and so they were in their corner conjugating verbs, and they had sketch pads. There was sketching involved. The girls from Aberdeen read and napped and tittered, and so that left me with the warden. For a reason that I don't recall, I told her that I wanted to be a writer, and so she immediately challenged me to a game of Scrabble. Over the course of those days, we played many games of Scrabble, and I learned that she was a writer both professionally and vocationally. She had gotten herself to be the hostel warden so she would have time to write, and she wrote dime store romances, but her real love was serious literary fiction, and that was what she was committing her life to. So we played Scrabble. And what happened, which is something we did not discuss, but we observed this, the German woman, Gisela, and Peter, the noble Australian, fell in love over the course of their sketching and conjugating, so to speak. And they went out into the weather, the rest of us did not, and I presume that they found a patch of dry forest floor somewhere or a cave, and when they came back, they expressed in very few words the rapture that had just occurred. It doesn't require many words to do that, it turns out. The warden and I, as I said, we did not discuss this. She radiated 2 very important things to me during the course of those days in the Scrabble playing. I did think of her as a witch. I felt that she put a hex on me. The first thing she beamed to me was that there is absolutely no way that you can be a writer because you cannot beat me at Scrabble. You have no language skills. And the second was more was a deeper communication, and that was, Missy, whatever happens on Rasay is not your material. And furthermore, you little brat, privileged American girl, whatever happens in all of Scotland is not your material. So I've thought over the years a lot about what it means to own the material, the raw material of experience, who gets to tell, what happens when you are the narrator, who is the authentic speaker of any particular tribe, so that when it came for me to use the material of my own family's orchard as a point of departure into fiction, I thought, this is my material, but it's also many other people's material. And yet I am forging ahead and will be the narrator of this material. So there's lots of implications about that. But I wanted to write a story about succession in a farm family business, the matters of who gets to stay when the thing is being passed down, who can't stay for whatever reason, who stays but isn't equipped to stay, who comes on the scene but is treated as the outsider and doesn't really have a certain power. And all of those issues I put into the body of a girl named Mary Frances Lombard. She wants more than anything in her family orchard never to grow up. If she has to, she is determined that she and her brother will run the farm. And I just want to read a short section here where Mary Frances and her father are going to a farmer's market in a city near a small town where the orchard is in Wisconsin. This is the first time they've gone to the market. She is 11, and as you probably know from farmers markets, there's the bread woman and the mushroom guy and the beef and pork man. And at one end of the street, there's the Lombard orchard stall, which is Mary Frances's family. And at the other end, there is the competitor, the Sykes orchard, which is run by their manager, whose name is Gideon. He is 25, Mary Frances is 11. In July, at our first market, I wandered down to Gideon's stand. I stood looking at his red, blushy apples, varieties that were bigger than ours and shinier. "Did you spray for maggot flies this week?" I asked him. He looked startled, I suppose because most people didn't begin a conversation or an acquaintance with that question. "Yep," he said, "and for codling moth." "We did too," I said importantly. I said, "We're trying that new disruption technology, the CM Flex." Maybe he laughed. It's possible he was chuckling. "Good stuff," he nodded. "It's pretty effective." "I know it." Gideon was undeniably cute, even though he was old, a man hardly taller than my brother, a pixie with soft-looking brown hair and pale blue eyes. All at once I was aware of my knobby knees, my skinny legs, my shorts, my plain yellow t-shirt, my drab hair, my ragged fingernails. I had occasionally wondered what it would be like to kiss a boy, and even though he was old, as I said, you couldn't ignore Gideon's upper lip that had a freckle smack in the center, right below the philtrum. The other thing, in addition to kissing, the thing I'd learned that was very different from the business of the ram and you, the tomcat and pussycat, the thing that President Bill Clinton and his intern had taught us, I had blocked that from my mind. Kissing Gideon's freckle, the idea of it, made me feel sick enough. He was about to say something else to me when a woman butted in on us, blaring her righteous question, "Are you organic?" My new acquaintance began to explain the Sykes Orchard spray program, the integrated pest management, a system designed to keep chemical applications to a minimum, the farmer spraying in relation to the pest's life cycles. We used IPM too, and like Tommy, were in close contact with the university entomologists, running trials for research, trying to wean ourselves away from pesticides where possible. I had been at markets before when those mothers assaulted us, the crones against cluster cancers. That's what my brother called them. They were women who never wanted to know the hard science of your practice. They weren't interested in parts per billion or the rate of breakdown or the lab results of residue, statistics that, if they just listened, would lower their blood pressure and maybe make them reasonable. Those mothers only wished us to know that we were the individuals poisoning their children in Gaia. I said two things in front of Gideon just then. I said to the lady, "Do you like biting into a worm when you eat an apple?" "I beg your pardon," she said to me. To the pork and beef guy right next door, I asked, "How do your animals fare after their surgeries?" Really, that's the kind of inane question those women were likely to ask. Gideon stopped talking. His pale eyes seemed to spin. He said to the mother, "You should check out the Lombard orchard. I think you'll like their program and their apples better." The woman walked away. Gideon burst out laughing. He said, "When you're older, do you think you might consider marrying me?" He laughed again. "You are hysterical." His question made me run as fast as I possibly could back to our own stand. I got in the van that was parked by our stall and locked the doors. My first proposal of marriage, my very first proposal, Gideon, I thought, had maybe in a certain way meant it, which made me feel dizzy and warm and pleased and distressed all at once, that freckle on his lip, for one thing. What did it take to fall in love? That was a ridiculous question to have to ask when I'd seen Gloria topple over and when I myself had been in love with Mrs. Kraselnick. That is to say, you didn't ask for it, you didn't plan, but the spell was cast upon you anyway. Abracadabra, swoon. Or maybe Gideon Hupp and Mary Frances Lombard would have an arranged marriage, our union on the order of the House of Hanover and the Stuarts commingling. My father thought very highly of Gideon, and if my brother was too dreamy to farm, if he was going to play computer games for the rest of his life, then I'd have to make do with Gideon. We at the Lombard orchard would steal Tommy Sykes' manager, Tommy's hope, steal him away in a blaze of duty to our enterprise. And anyway, if you were Gideon, would you rather have a perfected operation to rule, one that you would never own? Or would you rather, by marriage, possess the property, a place that, yes, was a little bit of a catastrophe, but a place that was crying out for your organizational skills and your brawn, a place where the institutional knowledge meant that the apples were truly delicious? Of course he would choose the Lombard orchard, saying, "I do" to Mary Frances and her entire family. I was the only middle schooler that I knew of who had a firm proposal of marriage. No small accomplishment. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming here tonight and for supporting the library, supporting independent bookstores, and especially supporting Parnassus Books. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. And it is especially wonderful to have my daughter Palace here. I'm really happy because I hear you have a giant statue of her namesake somewhere around here, and we're going to go and find that, and that is truly exciting. I'm also happy to be here with Jane Hamilton. Oops. I might have boom. Because I feel like I've known you for such a long time, and loved your work, and this particular book has a special place for me because of, and not just because, I love Mary Frances, and I love the book, but because of the setting in an apple orchard, because we've had this long association with apple orchards and with various iterations of a town apple orchard that my father and my mother have cultivated for years. So it just, but never at the level of this apple orchard. So it was fantastic for me to read about it. So I urge everyone to snap up this book, The Excellent Lombards. It's more than excellent. I was going to read this piece about a really violent volleyball game. And then I thought, I don't know how big volleyball is down here, girls volleyball. Is it huge? Well, I think I might read it then. Although, see, it does turn violent. And then I thought, I don't know if I want to give in to that, and it's not really exactly what the book is really about. The book is really about a tragic accident in the very beginning, which I've been signing the book, get past the first 6 pages and it gets better. Because I didn't mean to write that, and it just took over. And after that, in a traditional act, this is a setting on an Ojibwe reservation. The family, because this was 2 male best friends, and their wives are half-sisters, right? So they're very close, and one of the traditional Ojibwe man accidentally kills his best friend's son. This is a story my mother told me about, and it's actually something that I've found out has resonated with other Native people. It's something that, the act of reparation resonates, because then he brings his own son to become their son. And what happens next was what I was really fascinated with. What happens is this, the families really begin to merge after a time. And the sister of the boy who dies, who is a really ferocious kid, and made more ferocious by the loss of her brother, becomes adopted by the boy, who's given in return La Rosa. He's adopted by his big sisters, Snow and Josette, who are on a volleyball team. And then Maggie gets onto the volleyball team. And then this is what happens, because I don't know, it's called The Wars. And there is a lead up to this. Maggie makes so many enemies in her life, but some of them it's not under her, it's people who have trespassed against her. And she is a person of revenge. Yes, she's really a person of revenge. This is a high school, and there is a girl who has been saying really bad things about her and implying that even though she was attacked by some boys, that she was responsible. Her name is Braylon, so if things get bloody, then, well, Braylon deserves it, right? So the teams, well, they're the Pluto planets. The boys were the planets, so the girls became the lady planets. The reservation team is the warriors, but they're not the lady warriors, they're just the warriors, and they don't want themselves as a mascot, so they've got eagle shields and all kinds of stuff on them. And they have a coach, Coach Duke. He's a guy with a mingy ponytail, and they absolutely idolize him. And the thing is that the Warriors are a great team. They have great talent. They've won every volleyball game of this fall season, except this one first game with the Pluto Lady Planets. All right, the nights have turned colder and colder, and suddenly the Warriors are 8-1 with a grudge. Tonight they were playing the Pluto team again and ready to win. I don't like that they call scores kills, said Maggie's mother, Nola. Nothing should die. Maggie is the ferocious sister. Maggie's dad, Peter, took her hand. Nothing dies, said Peter. It's just a word. They were crushed into the stands, parent knees in their backs, parent backs against their knees. Nola had packed a small padded cooler with sandwiches and even some grapes, so expensive this time of year. The gym was all stuffy and there was only one stand. So the parents of the opposing teams had to sit together, and although they had tried to group themselves according to the team they'd come to support, they'd inadvertently mixed. She's so small, Nola whispered, always struck by the contrast between Maggie and her teammates. And the planets are... Peter caught himself. He was going to say massive or planetary. They were big, solid, formidable girls. Maggie had told them to watch for Braylon. I see her, said Nola loudly, the harsh eyeliner. Peter put his arm around her and spoke low in her ear. Remember the other parents? He hadn't seen Braylon's parents for a while, but he was pretty sure they were behind them. Oh, Nola pulled an imaginary zipper across her lips. The Warriors saluted first the parents, then their coach, then passed the opposing team. And you know how they fake touch their hands through the nets? That's what they were doing. They were saying, good luck, good luck, good luck, good luck, good luck to each other. Good luck, you wanted it, said Braylon to Maggie, with a smile pasted on her face. She passed swiftly, looking straight ahead. Did you hear it? Snow had been directly behind Maggie. Hear what? You wanted it, thought Maggie. Those boys had told Braylon, they told his sister, shake it off. Maggie had a little shimmy she did to get rid of a bad feeling or a failed hit. The team made a circle. They put their arms around one another. Coach Duke stood holding his clipboard in one hand. His other hand sliced the air with each deliberate sentence. He told them volleyball was just a game, except for right now, when it was more than a game. They were a family, sisters, warriors who would beat this team, restoring honor. Diamond was team captain. She looked at each one of them in turn. They silently rose and put 3 fingers in the air, and everyone thought they were pointing to the Holy Trinity, but it was their special move, W for warriors. Then they roared, warriors, 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 and jumped high and smacked hands. Josette was first up to serve. She loved the moment when the team slung off its false girly vagueness and became a machine. Rock that serve, baby! Emmeline's, her mother's voice, was then consumed by the other parent voices. Josette flew up and bashed it, but one of the brutal red-headed planet twins, Gwenna, caught it on a forearm, a missed it, but a setter managed to play it, and Braylon boomed it down the seam. Snow nonchalantly lobbed it. Diamond set with a precise fingertip pass to Regina, and that was that. Regina could drop a ball on a dime, an actual dime. For fun, they'd set up shots on the floor, dimes, and she kept everyone she hit and made $2. Crystal from the planets twisted to return Josette's next serve, shanked, and so it went. Josette got 6 serves in before the planets called timeout. Oh, they'll blast back now, said Coach Duke. Maggie, you're our secret weapon. They haven't tested you. So be ready, Josette. They will get your next serve if it kills them, so give them heck. And everyone, remember, an assist is as good as a kill. Maggie didn't think so. After each game, she totaled her kills on a piece of paper taped to her bedroom wall. And the scorekeepers added them up, too. And if a girl reached 1,000, she got a foot-high golden trophy. And Maggie wanted one. Newspaper headline, Girl of 1,000 Kills. She had developed her jump to ballerina height and perfected a sliding tip. When she was rotated into the hitter's position up front, the other team always wanted to show that tiny girl what. But with her slippery, eccentric, high leap blocks and tips, Maggie got to show them what. Josette's serving was upset by the interruption, as the planet's coach had intended, and Maggie felt the energy on the court shift. The warriors crouched. Braylon was at serve. Square-shouldered, chubby-jawed, goth-eyed, she didn't look at Maggie or seem to aim at her, but Maggie was ready anyway. Braylon got an ace off her. The ball had hesitated. Maggie could swear and changed direction. She flushed, but once she knew Braylon's trick, she could handle it. She watched the ball come off the heel of the hand, Braylon's hand, and this time she saw where it would break, and Maggie was there, but the ball wasn't. This was 2 points, back-to-back aces. The planet parents were shouting. Her parents were tense and silent. Maggie shimmied all over and stepped back into the game and kept her eyes on the serve this time and pried a weak rescue off the floor. But the planets returned the shot, and there began a long, bitter, hard-fought, manic volley with miracle saves and unlikely hits tamed into dinky, waddle-rolling blurps off the top of the net that drove the parents nuts. The Warriors continued their lead, but they fought hard for it. Luck was with them in close calls, causing a few planet parents to grumble. The Warriors took the first 2 games. Then the planets bore down, the luck went their way, and so did the next 2 games. And the tiebreaker 5th game was now on. Now, most volleyball games were competitive but affable, everyone straining toward good sportsmanship. Coach Duke had even sent home a code of conduct that the player and her parents had to sign. But during that 4th game, there had been hard hits, harder looks, a few jeering yells, smug high fives on points, and by the 5th game, an ugly electricity had infected the gym. Nola had yelled hard but held back her glee. She had tried, as Coach begged, not to dishonor the game of volleyball. Nola surreptitiously ate a grape. It was disappointing, with a tough, tasteless skin, watery chemical pulp. She tried another. Maggie didn't always serve, but the coach did not remove her from the lineup, and there she was, up. The Warriors had lost their first 2 points. This serve had to stop the planet's momentum, the pressure. Why, Maggie? Peter shouted encouragement, but Nola was silent because she was staring hard at her daughter, trying to pass luck into her by force of love. Maggie served into the net. Desolate, her mother threw her hands into her lap like empty gloves. The planet parents with the knobby knees in the back, the parents of Braylon cackled in pleasure. Peter caught Nola as she turned and put his arm around her. "Don't go there, honey," he said into her hair. But Nola only saw that Maggie was now stuck, right in the line of fire. A sob of anxiety caught in Nola's chest, but a buttery warmth now spread over Maggie's shoulders. Maggie looked so small and vulnerable with her sylph frame and spindle legs. She could have been standing on the court alone. She crouched, arms out. Crystal served straight to her, and Maggie set for Regina's surprised left dump point. Next serve from Snow, the other red had burned the ball down Maggie's left, but Maggie flipped underneath and socked it high. Josette assisted. Diamond landed a swift spike. Another point, another tie. Braylon stepped up and flared her vixen fury eyes. Maggie's stomach boiled. Braylon slammed the ball twice on the floor, impassive and stony mad. With a flick of power, she sent Maggie her booby trap special. It was supposed to break just over Maggie's head and land behind her. But Maggie knew Braylon's arm now, and with a surge of exuberance lifted off her feet. She swerved, spiked the ball into the donut. Kill. Nola had been standing the whole time. The parent nudged Peter, and he tried to pull her down. Kill, she screamed into that spot of silence. Kill, kill, kill. Maggie heard it, and the butter swirled down around her heart. Peter tightened his arm around Nola's shoulder and whispered in her ear, but she was someplace else. And this oddly filled him with relief, because this was not fake or unreal. There was no hidden meaning. This was the Nola he knew, not the super smiley one. This was the family dynamic, not the manufactured happy family with no aggravation, no anger, no loud voices, no pain allowed, where he felt so alone. He was for sure not alone now because Nola was going batshit. Sit the goddamn hell down. It was the woman behind her. Nola heard that command with a grape in her cheek. She turned, opened her mouth to give a dignified piece of her mind, and out it flew. exactly like a glob of green spit, landing on the mother's broad pink nose. A shocked pause. The father lifted himself, a squarish, bear-like man with sloping shoulders, a walrus mustache, a trucker hat that said Dakota, sand and gravel. He put his arms out to shove Nola down, but having perfected her move, she leaned forward and popped her breast into his grip. Trucker hat yelped. "Get your paws off me!" shrieked Nola. Peter only saw the hands. Mrs. Trucker hat was still wiping grape off her face when Peter let his fist fly. Oh, it felt so good to get the rage out. Then instant remorse as Trucker hat bent over face and hands. Nola, however, went numb with pleasure. The game was stopped, and a thin, apprehensive science teacher was forced to extract the 4 parents from the stands. Nola dreamily slid out, clinging tight to Peter's arm. Both failed to see that their daughter had blazed a beanball straight at Braylon as the whistle sounded to stop play. Distracted, Braylon let down her guard and sustained a facial, and now her nose was bleeding. The referee held up a yellow card, and out went Maggie to the boos of planet moms and dads. The planets, hearts blistering, played with vengeance energy, but lost control, faltered, missed easy returns, and lost by 8 points. The warriors high-fived it and made a subdued exit. It didn't feel exactly good, like a win. It felt like something bigger and darker had just played out. I didn't know the half of it, thought Maggie, still quiet with joy at the sight of Braylon's blood on the floor. Snow and Josette walked Maggie out the gym door. Braylon passed, but they stink-eyed her, and she strode to her parents' pickup. "How come she's got it out for you?" "She's from my old school. I gave her brother Buggy the ball kick." "Well, how come?" asked Josette. Maggie looked down at her feet and hunched her shoulders over. "Oh," said Josette. "Guess they're still mad," said Maggie. "No shit, she was gunning for you," said Snow. They watched the pickup with Braylon in it roar from the parking lot. "Oh my God! Holy!" Diamond caught up with them. "You know your dad punched out Braylon's dad and your mom spit on her mom?" "You got a badass family," Diamond said. Maggie jumped into her car's back seat. "Mom? Dad? Maggie." "Nice game," said Peter. Thank you.
We'll call on Miss Paget. Miss Paget, did you have a question?
I love you both so much. That's not a question, it's just a statement. But to have 2 of my besties here is very touching. And you did a great job. All right, here's the question, which Jane, you already touched on, but it's about this whole using information from your life thing. And I'm just wondering, as we have all gotten older, how that's changing for the 2 of you. If you feel more comfortable with it now or less comfortable with it now. And if you had your life to do over again, would you be Elena Ferrante? I'm serious. I really think about this. If you had the choice, if you could start back and you know then what you know now, would you be completely anonymous to everyone and be able to write anything and never go on book tour?
Oh, we both, yes, you first.
Well, I mean, as a follow-up, I'll answer it, but I wonder if you have felt constrained from what you wanted to write, because you write with such breadth and depth that I would be surprised if, I mean, I'm sure you have taboos, we all have taboos, but anyway, I will say that yes, I would love to be Elena Ferrante for lots of reasons, but I think it would be lovely to be anonymous. Not that I'm a famous person, but just I think that freedom that would allow you would be terrific. Having used my farm as a point of departure to write a fiction required a certain tenderness, and I tried to bring the right amount of tenderness to it, as while at the same time being truthful as I could about the material. But I might have written a slightly different book if I hadn't thought that people would associate, would have associations with me and this farm. And so there's that issue. In terms of getting old, several years ago, I ran into my agent in New York, and I had been avoiding her because I'd been writing so badly. And I felt kind of humiliated about all my various failures. And so I just happened upon her in the street. And she said, I don't know why you don't write about that farm where you live in Wisconsin. Write a memoir. And I said, I have no interest in writing a memoir. And she said, well, write a novel then. Those people are so interesting. And I said, well, I have to wait for them to die. And she said, well, you'll be dead too. So that's an agent. That impressed me. But I love in the Eleanor Ferrante books how her friend Leela, Eleanor's friend Leela, says you may never write about this, that, and the other. And there's a phase in the novel where we see her thoughts gyrating, and she's able to persuade herself that she actually is the one who must tell the tale. And I sort of had that own sense when I was working on this book. Well, other members of this family could write this story, but I think I'm the one to do it.
Well, I am not really comfortable in going on book tours, and I thought I would hide behind my writing and never, have to speak in public, and that was one of my fantasies. Like my most romantic fantasy really was to become a recluse and to live in total seclusion, and but you really can't do that if you're a Native American person, because there's a huge issue with who you are. I had to say, I really had to say, this is my tribe, this is the nation I belong to, these are my mother, this is her name, and to really go down through our descendancy. I mean, we really have to do that because I don't look Native, and even if I did, I could still be a fake Indian. So I can't do that. I could never do that. I had to be upfront from the very beginning, because there's really an issue with people taking on Native identity, appropriating Native identity, and writing. So from the beginning, that was impossible. And then there was the question of, how do I even handle being a public person? And mostly I hid from it, and I was really, it's really been one of those things I keep trying to come to terms with and gearing myself up for, it's taken months to get myself into an emotional state of mind where I can actually go out and be more public. But the other very interesting issue you bring up is the use of life experience, but for me also it's the use of cultural experience, right? Because this is all, it's about Ojibwe culture. A lot of the book is. What is appropriate, what is not? What I decided was, aside from, more general situations, like this one that my mother had told me about, in which I knew about other similar exchanges of family members. It's more like a sharing of a family member than a giving someone else. Other than that, I would, if there was a sacred story, if there was a traditional story, I would make sure that it was already in print. So I read and research a lot, and if I'm thinking of something that might be, giving something away or telling something that is more private culturally, I will make sure it's already in print. Yeah.
Now other people ask questions.
Now everybody else has to ask.
But I would say, I would like to just add one thing to that, which is that, so I was writing and not publishing for many years, and I had forgotten until, the last several weeks, what it meant to have readers and to have readers illuminating my own work. And that has been a renewed joy to meet readers. And it's sort of like being given virtual reality glasses. So I find myself wandering around in my own work and seeing things that I hadn't seen before. And that's a real privilege and a perk being published. And I truly had forgotten that aspect to it. So that's been wonderful.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Why are you concerned that a cultural story or experience already be in print before you relate it in some fashion?
Because there are a lot of teachings that I know a lot of, I'm within the community, so also within the traditional religious community, and there's certain things that I will hear or learn that people really are quite private about, or there's stories that people are very private about, that are, they just go way, way, way back. And those are the ones I'm talking about. It's not like there's a story in here that's an old, very old story, and I've heard it told, but I also wanted to make sure it was in print because I really liked the story and I wanted to use it. I don't want to, put something out that people don't want out in the public somehow. Just careful about that. But on the other hand, it's also, I get a lot of advice, and Pallas is like my first reader on this book. So Pallas also knew a lot about like there are young women in this story. I have 4 daughters, and as Pallas knows, I spent a lot of time in a volleyball stand with a lot of parents around me. And many is the time I thought, well, this could blow. So in a way, I really was using my own, I felt that this was an earned, a really earned moment here with the volleyball parents, because I had really put the time in. But I do go to Pallas and say, is this going over the edge or whatever? And yeah.
Just to pop in, my older sister, Persia, she's a Ojibwe immersion teacher, and she has a line to the cultural conversation in a much more direct way than I do. So she's definitely the person, I think, in terms of this question of like what stories are appropriate to tell and which ones aren't yours to tell. Mm-hmm. And she's definitely, she can ask an elder, like, is this something that can be shared, or is this something that is private? And or she just knows that really well. So I think that she's definitely added a lot to that.
That's
as
true.
Well.
That's true.
I mean, a lot of people. I just think that that's kind of important. I mean, I did do some advice on perfume. Yes, in 2003. But in terms of like religious. Stories. That's Persia's and your purview, and I think it's really interesting, but important that you're so careful not to publish anything without permission.
Did everyone hear what Pallas said?
That's being written to you, so.
Oh, it's being written. Okay.
Oh my God. So great.
There's no permission. We have not given permission. Yes.
This is for you, and I was wondering, now that you've written this book, how your family reacted to it.
How has my family reacted to this book? Well, my daughter, who is in my real family's position of Mary Frances in the book, said that she told me, I told her that I was working on this book many years ago, and she said, that's fine, I just won't read it, which was a lovely thing of her to say. And she still hasn't read it, and she said that she would read it maybe in a year or so. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't feel that she would be offended by it simply because it is not her. But I could be wrong. the only person in my extended family who has said anything, but not to me, said to my neighbor, this is a woman who works on the orchard, she said, I've always protected Jane, and when people have come to the apple barn to buy apples and wondered where she is, I've always just said, I don't know where she is, but now I'm going to say, walk that path, that's her house, knock on her door, I'm sure she'll be thrilled to see you. However, this is a person who's never read my work and will not read this book and wouldn't anyway, so it's not as if she has read it and is, offended by anything specific. She just, so I think it will be okay, but I, as I said, I tried to bring a level of tenderness to it. And also, I think because I'm writing from the perspective of a child who gets so much wrong, that there's that particular lens is in a way a kind of safety also. And they're all good people. But I remember reading this essay called Can Writers Have Friends by Miss Jane Smiley. And she concludes basically not. But she says that whenever she's using the details of an acquaintance or a friend, she's really using that detail to illuminate something that has nothing to do with that person. She just needs it to talk about the thing she's talking But she concludes the essay by saying that if someone ever uses her details, she hopes she remembers her own sage observation, because she doesn't think that she would like to contribute anything about herself to anybody else's work.
Louise, your work is about your family and your experience. Jane, isn't this the first time that you've used your family or your own local surroundings in a book?
Is this the time I've used my own family? I mean, I think every book has been autobiographical, but only in a way that I would maybe understand or know. This is, sort of more directly in terms of the place and the various positions of, I happen to have a daughter and a son, and I am married to a farmer, and so forth. So this one is more blatant in a certain way. But I think I'm quoting you from something you said long ago. If you try to unmix the fact and the fiction, it's like unmixing paint. And to me, this really is fiction. But the other work. I mean, I wrote a map of the world when I was much younger, and I wrote it, and many years later I reread it and I thought, oh my God, I was writing about my marriage. I simply didn't understand that at the time. This is one of the reasons I don't generally go back to read my work, because I don't wish to see.
I just want to, I really don't, generally, I avoid writing about my own life, or I try very hard to do that. But one of the joys is when people take things as true. And one of my favorite things that happened was that this short story of mine got into a memoir section in a textbook. And it starts out, the first line of it is, my mother was the surviving half of a blindfold trapeze act. And there it was in memoir, and I was so thrilled to,
And how did your mother feel about it?
She was just hysterical.
We're all so gullible.
I think the funny thing also is you can be very careful about writing and using your material, and then somebody who has not crossed your screen in years will say, I saw myself in your book. And it feels, is it kinder to say, I haven't thought about you in 30 years? I don't know. But you have such breadth. You're using the old material when it's available to you, and then you can write this volleyball scene, and you have these girls who are They talk such smack. You have such an ear for. I mean, you're in the ancients, and you are right here up to date. I'm just so impressed by how you knew what you knew. In all the books, but in this book too, because I think you're a little more jivey in this book than you've been before. I mean, the boys in the roundhouse, they are very funny, but these girls are really, it seems to me, quite up to date with their slinging the stuff around.
Thanks, Palace. We did have this whole thing about, it used to be dime store, but now it's drugstore perfume. There's a scene about that. And really, I always had this fascination with and love of cheap perfume. But I didn't think it wasn't cheap to me then, I mean, it was like the best stuff you could ever have, right? Evening in Paris, and then Windsong, and all of these ones. But I went, we really worked through all of the scents before, to get the just the way they captured emotion and memory and personality, right? And also at the end of that particular scene, I think, in that scene, they were offered white diamonds, the Elizabeth Taylor, America's leading fragrance. And so then I asked Palace, I go, so when were you aware of Elizabeth Taylor, like who she was? And Palace said, well, yeah, she was on the cover, the VHS cover of Cleopatra, remember? I'm like, no? Is that how you knew about Elizabeth Taylor? Because I can remember all the nuances of her romances, her life, everything happened. No, so that was, but she was still a big force. And this is set in 1999, 2000, then goes to 2003. So it's really interesting how she ran the gamut of both of our cultural lives.
It is.
Yeah.
From National Velvet to...
And then Michael Jackson's friend, right? So. Yeah.
My sister had a perfume called Ambush.
You borrowed it?
No, I did not. But she and my mother had the biggest fight of their whole life over ambush.
Really?
Because the whole house smelled of ambush.
Yeah.
And my mother hid the ambush.
Now, that one I don't know about. Yeah.
You're lucky. It came in a bright pink ceramic bottle, and it was hell on wheels. I have a technical question for you.
Okay.
You don't use quotation marks. Is that Ms. Petchett and I think that's maybe why you were able to write so much.
Yeah, that's it. You're right. No, I stopped in the Roundhouse, and I really don't know why. It's because I just stopped using. I wanted this flow. Like, I started writing more dialogue at that point, and I wanted this flow. And I got this letter from this 12-year-old boy, which I hope to God I answered, because it was the best letter ever. It said, "Dear Miss Erdich, I have just learned to use quotation marks. And now I've read your book." He was only 12.
Wow.
Which I
Yikes.
thought, wow. And he said, and now you're not using them. Why? Why? I know, I felt like I'd really betrayed him. I just thought, why are they in there? And then I stopped using them, and it freed me up it freed my dialogue somehow.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you can think, I
could write so much more.
I mean, it's very uncluttered that way, in a certain way.
I don't really know if it's a good idea or not, but, it has helped me with dialogue, just to feel like the more immediacy.
I am so giving up quotation.
Let's all do it.
Is there one more question? I feel like I made a mistake asking the first question. It sort of killed the Q&A from the audience. No.
Oh, no, there has to be another question.
Here we go.
All right.
Speaking of people who don't use quotation marks, I think Cormac McCarthy once said something to the effect of books are made of other books. I'm sure it's not an original observation, but in the same vein of terribly mixed metaphors, not unmixing paint, are your books made of other books? Is he right?
Are books made of other books? And he doesn't use contraction. He doesn't use the apostrophe in the contraction. Now that drives me crazy.
He's got the contractions
yes,
too?
Yes, don't,
Whoa,
can't.
Oh my God. Are your books made of other books?
Are my books made of other books? I was thinking a lot when I wrote The Lombards, about a member of the wedding, which involves a girl named Frances who is deranged. And I think if high school students read that book now, they would think, why can't they get her medications right? And she's so fierce and wrong about so many things and right about other things. And she stabs the African-American housekeeper, not fatally, but and it's a perfect book, and I read that near the beginning of my adventure with this, and I thought, I want a bit of Francie's genetics in Mary Frances, because Francie also, in a way, is deranged by love. They're deranged for different reasons, but, so I would say, yes.
Did you say it was the Mary Frances in Flannery O'Connor's short story?
No, in Carson McCullers, A Member of the Wedding.
Oh my gosh, because in this short story where it's Mary Frances, I think, or Mary Grace, I think, who says to a very self-satisfied, smug woman,
Warthog from hell.
you go to hell, you will where you came from, you old warthog. And it just shatters this woman's self-image, right? Remember that? And she goes back, and nothing is the same in her life. Nothing is the same after she says this to her. And that was Maggie for me. That was, the ferocity that she had and the kind of brutality she had for part of the book. And then she has to try and save her mother. So in a way, this book is a lot about children saving their parents, which is clearly what's happened to me, exactly.
You have the best sex scene. I mean, there's this two-page. Anyway, it's so beautiful. You write sex like nobody's business. I'm just saying.
Oh man, that is the best compliment, because it's
so hard
to do, but
so
especially
hard.
if you use quotation marks.
Thank you for being here.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.